Tonight's keynote speaker, Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel, has a long and strong record of animal protection, having taken legal action on issues including puppy mill fraud, endangered species conservation, and animal cruelty. AG Nessel also has been a national leader in defending state farmed animal welfare laws, such as California's Prop 12. In 2022, she formed a coalition of other state attorneys general to file an amicus brief in the U.S. Supreme Court case, National Pork Producers Council versus Ross, successfully arguing in favor of states' ability to regulate commerce within their own borders by setting their own health, safety, and welfare laws. The resulting landmark ruling is one of the most significant legal victories the animal protection movement has ever achieved. And as some of you may know, this is not just a job for the Attorney General, but as a love for animals and a personal obligation to protect them runs deep within her family. Please join me in welcoming tonight's keynote speaker, Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel.
Thanks, Chris. Wow, it is so invigorating to be here with you all tonight, and such an honor and a privilege. All the great work that the Animal Legal Defense Fund does, and I've heard about for so many years. Firstly, I want to start with a shout out to somebody who's been a great influence on me in life, and that's my brother Ari Nessel, who's somewhat of an animal rights maverick. I thank him for when my son was 11, locking him up in a room and forcing him to watch videos that he had taken undercover at a slaughterhouse, and he never ate meat ever again. So mission accomplished, Ari. He's also available for birthday parties and bar mitzvahs if you're interested. But a wonderful man, and I really appreciate the work that we've now been able to do together. I want to congratulate all the awardees on all the incredible work that they've done. We have a lot of Michigan people here represented today. And congratulations, Dr. Favre. This is how you know if you have a Spartan in the room. Go green! See, it works every time. But I've heard a lot about people who do amazing work at law firms, doing pro bono work, people who work for nonprofits, people who work at universities. But I hope that you'll see through the course of my presentation tonight that maybe you ought to work for a Department of Attorney General instead if you really want to get stuff done. I've learned that sometimes instead of fighting the man, sometimes you just be the man. And you can get more done, not literally, but figuratively. It is a way to get a lot done. I have the authority in the state of Michigan to basically file any case or intervene in any case in my parents' patriarch capacity, and that's generally deemed to be on behalf of the people. But people intersect with animals in a variety of different ways, and it allows you to get so much more done working as basically the state's attorney than you can in some of these other capacities. So great work that you've all done, but also if you want to apply, we have openings. So just putting it out there. There you go. All right, I can't click and talk at the same time. It's just too much pressure. As a longtime animal lover, I'm somebody who has always had seemingly an abnormal number of cats. And then I had the good fortune to marry a woman who also always had an abnormal number of cats. And my wife actually had to run for city council just to change the ordinance violation so that we wouldn't be considered hoarders. And that is a true story, unfortunately. But again, that's another reason for civic engagement, right? Anyway, so our office is always working day in and day out to, defend public safety and protect consumers, and we safeguard our residents' health and promote animal welfare as well. And I'm so excited for this opportunity to tell you about the work that we've done at our department and some other interesting cases that is fascinating, because I'll read about an interesting case I want to talk about, and it turns out it's one of your cases always. So just what a brain trust in this room right now. It's incredible. So talking a little bit about the case that Chris touched on, the pork producers, that I know most of you are probably familiar with, National Pork Producers Council v. Ross, case that again went to the United States Supreme Court in May of 2023 and yielded a favorable decision for animal rights. The question before the High Court was whether a California law aimed at improving animal welfare and consumer health, Prop 12, violated the Dormant Commerce Clause. And I know that all of you that practice law are like, God, my whole life, all I ever wanted to do was practice law relevant to the Dormant Commerce Clause. It's fascinating, and how do I get in on that action? But turns out it's very important, and the voter-approved law regulated certain farm animal confinements, and it forbid the in-state sale of pork meat that comes from breeding pigs or their immediate offspring if the animals are, quote, confined in a cruel manner. Now, the pork producers, along with the American Farm Bureau Federation, who has never supported me, I will tell you, in any of my runs for office, but that's fine, argued that the California law violated the Dormant Commerce Clause because it had the practical effect of controlling conduct beyond California and intruding into other states' operations. And to understand that case and its outcome, you really have to understand a little bit about the U.S. Constitution's Dormant Commerce Clause, which is one of those things that, again, maybe some of you have learned in law school and think, well, I'm probably never going to have to know that again. We call it dormant because the provision is sleeping, as it were, in the sense that it implies, rather than directly states, that so long as Congress can't enact laws that discriminate against or unduly burden interstate commerce by favoring their own economic interests over those of other states, in Pork Producers v. Ross, the pork industry argued that California, by prohibiting the sale of pork where the pigs had not been humanely housed, was favoring its interests over those of other states. Now, Michigan teamed up with Illinois to draft and lead the multi-state amicus brief supporting California and its law, and our coalition argued that the broad rule the pork producers were advocating for, that regulations in one state could not have an effect in another state, would call into question many long-standing and important state laws, such as product safety standards, price gouging, predatory lending, energy standards, and many more, and that it jeopardizes the state's sovereignty, the state's continued ability to address pressing matters of public health and safety within their borders. And we explained that the Dormant Commerce Clause shields the interstate markets from discriminatory and protectionist regulations. It doesn't inhibit states from enacting even-handed statutes that might indirectly affect out-of-state conduct. So the 15 states that signed onto our amicus brief had different approaches to regulation of pork products sold within their borders. Some of those states, such as Michigan and Illinois, included produce pork for sale throughout the United States. And in 2018, actually, Michigan was home to more than 1.18 million hogs and more than 2,000 farms. Other states in our coalition don't produce pork, although their residents do purchase it. And many states regulate animal confinement practices within their borders, but not all their laws are similar. In Michigan, for example, chickens must be kept in a cage-free housing system with adequate space and enrichments such as scratch areas and perches. Regulates the confinement of chickens, but we all agreed that the pork producers' broad proposed rule would impair the state's ability to protect the health, the safety, and the welfare of their residents. And the court ended up affirming the Ninth Circuit's dismissal of the pork producers' complaint, challenging California statute. Now, importantly, while the court reiterated that the Dormant Commerce Clause prohibits the enforcement of state laws that are driven by economic protectionism, it also reiterated that state laws can and often do have the practical effect of controlling extraterritorial commerce without violating the Constitution. And in the pork producers' case, the pork producers conceded that California's law imposes the same burdens on in-state pork producers that it imposes on out-of-state pork producers. And so that was quite a victory and a fun law school lesson. The EATS Act, which many of you, I know, are familiar with. As a result of the outcome of the pork producers case, federal legislation called the EATS Act, otherwise known as the Ending Agricultural Trade Suppression Act, was proposed as part of the 2023 Farm Bill. And the EATS Act was aimed at influencing state agricultural product standards and sought to prevent states from imposing regulations on agricultural products sold within state borders if those products were produced in other states under different standards. Now, my office was very involved in opposing this legislation, and I sent my Solicitor General to Washington, D.C., where she joined law professors, economists, and animal protection law advocates in speaking to legislative staffers, especially those involved in the Senate Agricultural Committee, about the dangers of the EATS Act. And my Solicitor General explained the importance of the state's authority to regulate their own markets to address various health, safety, and welfare issues, something that states have done throughout the history of this country. And never before have I been such a fierce advocate for the 10th Amendment as I am right now with Donald Trump back in the White House. Anyway, that was a side note. Happy No King's Day to all who celebrate, by the way. Anyway, so in April of 2023, my Solicitor General also joined Harvard professors and folks from the Animal Legal Defense Fund in a Zoom roundtable panel about discussions about the EATS Act and other efforts to negate state-level progress for farmed animals. And not long after, Michigan and Illinois again led a coalition of 15 state attorneys general to circulate a multi-state letter opposing the EATS Act, which we sent to our congressional leaders. And we let them know that the impact of this law would be very detrimental to the states. In Michigan alone, the EATS Act would have threatened laws that govern subjects such as cage-free eggs, flammable standards for cigarettes, restrictions on the sale of foods that are past their due date, and restrictions on the production and sale of foods that are not prepared in commercial kitchens. And I am grateful, so grateful, for the work that my department staff did and for the amazing advocates at the Animal Legal Defense Fund for their incredibly hard work and their continued hard work on this important issue. Endangered species. During my time as Attorney General, my office has taken some significant criminal and civil actions in order to protect animals. And for instance, in 2019, during the first Trump administration, I joined with 17 other attorneys general and the city of New York in filing lawsuits to stop the Trump administration's rollback of the Endangered Species Act. The actions of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the National Marine Fisheries Services rules undermine the key requirements and purpose of the Endangered Species Act. Of specific concern, the rules added economic considerations to the Endangered Species Act's science-driven and species-focused analysis. I know we're not supposed to say science-driven anymore, ever, but we still believe in it. It restricted the circumstances under which species could be listed as threatened. It eased the protection afforded to threatened species and made it harder to designate critical habitat for endangered species. Now, the agencies ultimately backed off in 2022 and agreed to vacate the rules and issue new ones that were much more protective of threatened and endangered species. I wonder what the difference was between 2019 and 2022 in terms of the federal government. But my office continues our efforts to protect endangered species, first by writing a comment letter in 2019 and later writing an amicus brief in 2021. We joined in with the Oregon Attorney General in support of an action to fight the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's rule removing gray wolves from the list of endangered species. Now, Michigan's Upper Peninsula is home to at least 768 gray wolves and counting. Based on this latest assessment, the brief argued that the Wildlife Service made the move contrary to the Endangered Species Act and to the detriment of the gray wolf populations. The court vacated the rule, keeping protections for wolves in place nationwide. Fun fact, I went to a federal park in Michigan called Isle Royale, which is home to a number of gray wolves that were there indigenously, then later had to be repopulated, and tried my hardest to actually find a gray wolf. I was not successful in that effort, but did find some mooses that had some bad encounters with the gray wolves. But you know, having these predators is incredibly important, and continues to be incredibly important. My department's consumer protection team also has urged grocers to use clear signage when it comes to advertising food, like cage-free chickens, so that consumers can make informed choices about the foods they purchase. And beginning this year, Michigan law prohibits the sale of eggs from caged hens. My office has also taken steps to stop the despicable practices of puppy mills. Earlier this year, my office filed an assurance of voluntary compliance and discontinuance to resolve an investigation into unlawful business practices by Paige Harkema of Oshtemo Township. Now, Harkema was the subject of an investigation by my office after she posted a dog, Toby, as a RescueMe.org dog up for adoption using an alias in May of 2024. And the post claimed that Harkema needed to rehome the dog after receiving an eviction notice due to his barking. Two Michigan consumers saw the listing, paid her a $250 adoption fee, and received Toby's veterinary and vaccination records, but they were, in fact, falsified. Now, the terms of the insurance require Harkema to cease and desist from engaging in deceptive business practices and comply with Michigan's Consumer Protection Act moving forward. Because the evidence suggested to us there may have been many other victims, we obtained settlement funds sufficient to compensate other complainants, and then we issued a press release inviting anyone similarly affected to file a complaint with our office. My office also launched an investigation into Ryan Thompson, the owner of the dog breeding business Fallen Timbers in Morenci, for allegedly falsifying veterinarian records for at least 3 dogs sold to Michigan consumers. And as one example, in November of 2024, a consumer filed a complaint with the department alleging that she adopted a 4-month-old boxer puppy from Fallen Timbers for $1,500 after finding the business through its Facebook page. Now, she was provided with a health guarantee in the sales contract, assuring her that the puppy had been immunized, wormed, and was in good health, along with veterinarian records purportedly from Hillcrest Veterinary Clinic. However, a subsequent vet visit confirmed that the puppy had a respiratory infection and tested positive for various different diseases, many of which I can't pronounce, it turns out. But the Hillcrest Veterinarian Clinic told the department specifically that they had never examined this puppy. So in addition to these types of legal actions, my office has created consumer alerts and videos that are available on our consumer protection website, warning consumers about the risks of purchasing a puppy from unscrupulous breeders. And among other advice, the alert encourages people to consider contacting their local shelters instead. CAFOs. My office also does a lot of work related to water pollution caused by concentrated animal feeding operations, or, as you know, CAFOs, more commonly referred to as factory farming. This type of industrialized farming can result in a lot more pollution than a small family farm that only houses, a few dozen animals. So it's important that the state issue permits to protect our natural resources from the large amounts of waste that they can produce every year, and to take enforcement actions against farms that fail to comply with those permits or refuse to get them in the first place. My office has recently settled 2 lawsuits against CAFOs who failed to obtain or abide by their permits, and has ongoing litigation against others. My office is also continuing to defend the most recent, most protective surface water discharge permit that our client, the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy, or EGLE, as we call it, issued over 5 years ago. And we had a big win recently at the Michigan Supreme Court just last summer, which upheld EGLE's ability to issue protective permits, and now we are focused on defending the permit itself. But wait, there's more. Protecting whistleblowers. Private citizens are a vital component of holding corporations, including our agricultural industry, responsible for their treatment of animals. And some state legislatures have taken up measures to prevent private citizens from reporting their personal observations of farm conditions, a direct attack on whistleblowers. First Amendment's rights to raise public awareness around certain environmental, public health, worker safety, and animal rights violations taking place in these facilities. Many of these laws have been challenged in court, and some have been struck down through litigation. In such instances, the Supreme Court has repeatedly refused to take up on appeal and rule on these issues, tacitly affirming the constitutionality of First Amendment protected whistleblowing. I'm sure many of you in this room have had something to do with those cases. Michigan has not adopted legislation to restrict citizens' rights to report on conditions observed on farms. The ability for private citizens to raise public awareness around environmental, public health, worker safety, and animal rights concerns is essential into holding agricultural industries responsible. And there is no place for censorship in the oversight of farms, especially highly profitable factory farms. Our residents deserve the assurance that these enterprises will be held accountable when they violate the law, and our office will do everything we can in our capacity to ensure that those types of laws don't don't get fast in the first place in the state of Michigan. Habeas corpus. This is like a law review class right now, isn't it? Either it's really interesting for people or it's putting people to sleep. But either way, it's a lot of interesting stuff I think that we do at the office. So this month, the Michigan Court of Appeals heard arguments. This is not our case, but I found it to be fascinating. I found out that it's the case that somebody who's here tonight. But I have to tell you about it because it's so interesting. So whose case is this? The chimpanzee case. All right. Well, I hope you don't mind, but I read about it, and now I have to talk about it. So it's really cool stuff. So the Michigan Court of Appeals heard arguments in a case concerning the habeas corpus rights of 7 chimpanzees currently living at the DeYoung Family Zoo in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. Now, habeas corpus is a long-standing legal principle that protects against unlawful detention. And in 2023, the Non-Human Rights Project sued the DeYoung Family Zoo, arguing that the facility's unsafe living conditions and protocol of unjust confinement was a violation of these 7 chimps' right not to be unlawfully detained. Brilliant. So a lower court dismissed this line of reasoning, denying the plaintiffs their request to transfer the chimps to a designated sanctuary. But now it is up to the Court of Appeals to decide whether the evidence of the chimpanzees' cognitive complexity, including a scientific declaration submitted by Jane Goodall herself, meets the threshold necessary to grant them the right to habeas corpus under Michigan law. My office has not had any involvement in the case, but we are as eager as you are to see how the Court of Appeals rules on this matter. And I have to say there were some very conservative judges on that panel who seemed very, very interested in the merits of this case. So well argued, and we look forward to seeing how the court rules in that matter. And give yourself a hand if you're involved in that case. Criminal prosecutions. My office has partnered with Michigan Humane to take criminal cases against animal abusers, and just some to talk about. One prosecution stemmed from a complaint made to Michigan Humane about dogfighting involving an individual named Kevin Warren of River Rouge. A search warrant at his home revealed 3 dogs with physical injuries consistent with fighting. And moreover, there were supplemental information at the residence, presumably used to treat wounds. There was some medication that were there. A search of Warren's Facebook account showed communications dating back to March of 2019 related to breeding and selling dogs for fighting. And in addition to serving several years of probation, Warren was ordered to pay the Michigan Humane Society over $1,500 in restitution required to undergo cognitive behavioral therapy, and was prohibited from owning any dogs for the duration of his probation. And this is important, right? Because today's animal abusers are tomorrow's serial killers. I mean, it's just true. And we have to take these cases seriously, and we have to make sure that when we can, people are actually getting psychological treatment so that they don't continue this abuse or any other types of abuse. In Michigan, a person who tortures or kills a pet with the intent to cause mental suffering or distress to another person or to exert control over another person is guilty of a felony punishable up to 10 years in prison. And this 2019 law recognizes the connection between animal abuse and domestic violence, and it provides law enforcement with the tools we need to hold dangerous perpetrators accountable. Julius Hawley of Detroit had a history of violence against multiple women, including convictions for criminal sexual conduct and domestic violence dating back to 1992. Now, after a series of stalking incidents, Holly broke into the home of his ex-girlfriend in October of 2022. He stole and damaged her property, and he took her Yorkshire Terrier mixed dog. He then recorded himself beating and torturing the dog and sent the videos to his ex-girlfriend. The dog was later abandoned in a bucket next to the house and taken from that location to Michigan Humane to ensure it would not be abused again, and thankfully was able to treat it and get the dog back into good health and was able to adopt it out, fortunately. When the case garnered media attention, Holly fled the state. He was extradited from Ohio in late 2022, so that's one good thing that Ohio has done. If you're from Michigan, you have to trash talk Ohio. It's like it's actually legally mandated. Mr. Holly was sentenced to 5 to 15 years imprisonment and received, probation on owning or possessing any other, or a prohibition, on owning another animal. And as I said, the dog survived and it is in good health, fortunately. But again, these horrific crimes have to be taken incredibly seriously. So I guess I would just say, at long-lasting conclusion, whether it's criminal prosecutions or civil enforcement and really everything in between, my office and many departments of Attorney General are fighting hard to preserve and expand animal rights in our states and across the country. And I want to thank all the people in this room for your tireless advocacy on behalf of the voiceless. What you are doing matters so much to so many. It matters for our planet, for our public health, for our public safety, and for animal welfare alike. And please know that after this conference is over, you can go back home and you can apply for a job at the Michigan Department of Attorney General. Again, we do have openings for those of you who are fleeing the federal government right now. Please think of Michigan as your home away from home. But with that, thank you guys so much, and it was such a pleasure getting to talk about this work and meeting so many of you and hearing about your work. You're truly making the world such a better place. So thank you.
So you see, I wasn't just hyperbole when I said she has a long and strong record of animal protection. So please thank again Attorney General Dana Nessel. And if there was anyone as deserving for this award, a Leadership in Animal Protection Award, it is the Attorney General. So again, thank you. We're proud to present you with this award for everything you've done for animals. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.